This is the Ramana Maharshi 40 Verses on Reality Satsang, a time to listen, reflect, and inquire into the self. Know yourself and be always free and at peace. Welcome. I'm Richard Clarke, hosting this satsang. I'm a seeker, like you, sharing what we love. I've been blessed with years of deep teaching and practice that I bring to this satsang. This week's reading from 40 Verses on Reality is verse 28. These are Ramana's words. Just as a man would dive in order to get something that had fallen into the water, so one should dive into oneself with a keen, one-pointed mind, controlling speech and breath, and find the place whence the I originates. Where does this sense of I come from? You should thoroughly investigate, Ramana tells us. This seeming I has only the reality that you give to it. It seems real because it borrows its reality from you, the self. The ego, the source of suffering, exists only because you put it there. Some think, if only I could do something about this. Well, there is something you can do. Watch within yourself. Watch the ego. Notice it comes and goes. Watch how it rises. See how it gets its power from you, from the consciousness that you are. See how the ego is not real, since it is not there always. It was never real. It was just an assumption you made long ago. When you see the ego was never real, then it loses its power. How can you do this? Ramana tells us it starts with a one-pointed mind, controlling speech and breath. Control of speech and breath brings a quiet mind. It is with this quiet mind that inquiry can dive deep. It is when you dive deep into yourself that you can see what you are and what you are not, and reveal your real identity as the open, knowing consciousness in which everything arises, and that is illuminated by its own light. This is your identity, your only reality. This is the self. You are the screen, not the movie playing on it. As your investigation gets deeper, you'll notice something. Some experience it as a kind of lightness of being, where everything just seems to flow more easily. This is a sign you're going the right way. Notice this within yourself and acknowledge it. This gives you more energy for the search. But don't let the mind fool you. If it is something that begins or has a cause, then it's not the real you. Who you are does not have a beginning. You just are. Who you are, the self, does not have a cause. It just is. Your identity is not a transformation. Rather, it is a matter of knowing who you have always been. How do you know this? Look at your sense of I. Where does it start? Not in your body, but in your being, your consciousness. Notice your awareness. Become aware of awareness. Notice it. Be curious. Love it. Open to it. And become it. Remove what you are not, and who you are stands alone, one, without a second. Here are some notes for practice to make this your experience. Inquire. Notice that you exist, and know you exist. Feel this I. Then investigate. Where does this sense of I come from? Is it from the body? How can this be? The body doesn't say I. The only I ever find is one that I superimpose upon this body. Does it rise with the senses? I can't find I in the senses either. Is it from the flow of breath and energy within the body? Breath doesn't say I. Prana doesn't say I. I know breath and prana. Who is it that knows? Is it with thought that the I comes into being? I know these thoughts, and they do not know me. How then can thought be I? Is it the intellect that makes meaning out of thoughts from which the I arises? The ego rises from the intellect, and the ego is known. Otherwise it would have no effect. Who knows this inconstant ego? Is the ego I? The ego goes away in deep sleep. Do I go away then too? Does this I originate from the bliss of deep sleep in which the ego and mind are silent, and from which they and the world seem to rise when we wake? But I know I slept, and sleep comes and goes. But do I? I can't be anything that is temporary. So, who am I, if not the body, senses, prana, thought, intellect, or the bliss of sleep? Who knows all these? Now, to our videos for the week. First is Ādyaśakti, and he is talking about verse 28, dive deep.
Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala.
Namaste. and welcome to another episode of Uladu Narpadu. If you can dive deep within yourself. Now, I don't know about anybody else, but I've done a lot of free diving, skin diving as it's called. And of course, you have to hold your breath and dive down into the water and look around or whatever you're going to do. So it's like that. The truth is hidden within us, but it's not on the surface. One has to dive deep. And it feels like that. It feels like restraining the breath, concentrating the mind, and making a one-pointed effort. It means that one approaches the subject or the theme of the meditation from many different angles at once. If the theme is the self, then one approaches from a pragmatic and practical point of view. One follows the instructions of one's spiritual master. One also cultivates bhakti, love for the self. And then there's a mantra you can chant, and specific types of meditation designed to reveal the self. That's what this verse is about. In Raja Yoga, the reference is often made to controlling the breath. But that doesn't mean that we control the breath and then meditate, or that controlling the breath is a cause of meditation or enlightenment. It's not. What it means is that when the mind is one-pointed and directed toward the actual topic, the actual subject of the meditation, I am, the self, consciousness, or Brahman, then automatically the breath comes under control. We don't have to make a separate effort. Well, you begin by taking care of business. Karma yoga. Karma yoga means, really, creating the conditions where meditation is possible. So it means having a silent, private space where you can meditate, whatever that takes. And also keeping it clean and keeping your body clean and healthy. Not allowing things to slide so that they become worries, but taking care of things timely and efficiently so that the business is complete in the present. Then you don't have to worry about anything. You can meditate without a care in the world. And then right view. One should receive the instructions from one's spiritual teacher, guide, or guru. And what does that mean? It means hearing. Hearing and repeating them to yourself, at least, or to others, until you're absolutely certain you understand. Because the best way to learn something is to teach others. So in that way, one can be sure one has right view, and then form the intention based on that right view. What's the next step after karma yoga? Bhakti. So bhakti means developing love and affection. For what? Well, whatever is the subject of your meditation. If you're focused on bhakti, you may select some form of God. God has 8 basic forms that are given in the Dakshinamurti Stotram. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, the moon, the sun, and the jiva, the living entity. So one can worship God in all of these forms, in any of them, whatever is convenient. So if, for example, one's ideal of divine personality is Shiva, one can worship Shiva in the temple or in the form of the hill. Or if one prefers Vishnu, any of the incarnations of Vishnu. There's so many forms of God, different personalities which have divine qualities. One can worship one's guru, guru puja or guru bhakti. This is a very good form. Or one can worship one's self. Not the petty little individual ego, but the real self, which is actually the goal of this meditation. So then one moves on from bhakti to Raja Yoga. Now Raja Yoga does talk about controlling the breath, but not by effort. That's Hatha Yoga. Hatha Yoga is way down the list on Karma Yoga, taking care of the body. So it may be helpful to do some breathing exercises if, for example, your breathing capacity is low or your cardio stamina is low. One should do some breathing exercises to increase lung capacity and like that. That's all right. But that's not pranayama. Don't fool yourself. Real pranayama means controlling the prana, not just the breath. So the prana should be tranquil, calm, focused, easy, smooth, gentle, and full of pleasure. That's real control of the breath. Now, what you can do is simply watch the breath. And of course, in the beginning, you're going to try to control it. So the trick here is to watch the breath, but also be watching for other things, such as light. When light comes in meditation, that's a very good sign. That means your concentration's getting good. So not just watching the breath, because that's going to put too much attention on the body, but also watching the mind, watching thoughts, watching for light, watching for one's attention. And if you can watch your watching, well, that's really excellent. Attention of attention, consciousness of consciousness, awareness of awareness. This is the sublime height of Raja Yoga. And what that leads to is Jnana Yoga. Jnana Yoga means being aware of the self, not just the ego, but the real self, the source of the ego. So you can begin Jnana Yoga once you've understood its principle, which you can very easily understand by this series, Uladu Narpadu, or Upadesha Undiyar, and see where the ego arises. Now, when Bhagavan says where, he doesn't mean a physical location. He means the psychological or spiritual origin of the ego. Where does ego come from? Ego is a lie. Ego is an illusion. But it's based on something real, and that is the real self. So the only reason ego has any standing at all, or seems to be a reality at all, is because it's based on the self. When the self is found, ego disappears. And that's the actual conclusion or aim of Jnana Yoga. Not that we should try to artificially repress breathing or any of our energies, but when we concentrate the mind and aim it properly at realizing the self, then our energy becomes very smooth and light, gentle, amiable, and kind. And we automatically experience calmness, centeredness, focus, enthusiasm, and pleasure within the mind. That's real meditation, and that cannot be shaken by anything outside. So, as it's said, The dogs may bark, but the king's caravan will pass. What does that mean? That once you attain or grasp the actual subject of meditation, then nothing can disturb it.
And now, my teacher, Nome, constant inquiry, perpetual knowledge.
Your true being exists beyond the body, beyond the mind, and without an ego, the illusion of a separate individuality. Beyond the body, mind, and ego, yourself is perfectly full. It is of the nature of great bliss and imperturbable peace. It is changelessly existing, and by its nature it is self-luminous consciousness. We refer to it as Satchidananda, Sat Chit Ananda, being, consciousness, bliss. These three terms signify one indivisible essence, your real self. An Upanishad refers to it as Satyam Jnanam Anantam, the true, the knowledge, the infinite. To realize yourself as that, and only that, is to know reality. And it is to be the reality that you know. Its happiness is complete. The self is only one, and it is changeless by nature. You do not have two selves. Your existence is absolutely singular. And that singular existence is immutable. That is, it never undergoes any change at any time. It is not born, it does not perish, it does not change, no matter what changes occur in the world, in your body, in your mind. It is the tendency of ignorance to confuse what is not the self with the self, and to mix up the real and the unreal, so that the unreal appears as if real, and the real appears as if unreal. And what is truly yourself seems other, as if a God far away, while what is not yourself is taken to be your identity. Such is the characteristic of delusion. Such delusion or ignorance has no power except that which you lend to it. It consists of the attribution of your own reality, your own identity, to that which is not so. In order to free oneself of ignorance, so that the innate happiness, the complete peace, the real bliss shine, inquire. Inquire to know the true nature of your existence. Such is the essence of sadhana or spiritual practice. Shankara says, it is he who strives who realizes. The Bhagavad Gita is replete with numerous references to striving, to continuous sustained effort. Likewise is it the spirit of the Vedas, continuous, sustained, persevering effort. In what way is the effort to be applied? It should be applied to the destruction of ignorance. For the self is not something to be gained anew. The ever-existent is, after all, always present, never more, never less at any time. So why is it that its radiant bliss appears not to be experienced? It is only due to the veiling of delusion. So practice, intense, continuous practice, should be directed to the destruction of that illusory veil, of that ignorance, which seems to cover the truth about your real nature. Of all forms of sadhana or spiritual practice, the essence is knowledge, self-knowledge. And the practice is successful, fruitful, according to the degree or depth of that knowledge. Because this is so, and because the self is one's own self, the Maharshi advised constant, profound inquiry within yourself as to who am I? What is your own existence? Who am I? The individual seems implicit in the inquiry, the one who is the inquirer. But as Sri Bhagavan points out, like a stick used to turn a burning pyre, gets burnt up in the process. Likewise, the I, apparently implicit in the inquiry, is burned up in the very process of inquiring. That is, if I, assumed to be an individual due to the tendencies of ignorance, inquire as to who I am, the I-ness, that is the egoity, being unreal, simply vanishes, like a mirage when you get close to it to see what it is. What remains is the eyeless true I, that is the egoless self, which is actually the ever-present reality. When it is realized as such, the realizer and that which is realized are identical, and being identical, separation is not possible. So if you say to yourself, you're going to practice, truly practice. If you want full bliss, practice fully. If you want intense peace, practice intensely. If you see the need to know yourself and the futility of attempting to know anything else without knowledge of yourself, then practice by inquiring to know yourself. And if you know yourself, then Brahman knows Brahman.
Now, a short meditation, self-inquiry. Breathe in and breathe out. Long, slow breaths. Feel the breath as it comes in, then as it goes out. Notice that you exist and investigate within yourself. Feel the sense of I. Where does it come from? Is it from the body, the senses, the life force, from thoughts, from the mind, from a dream, from the quiet mind in deep sleep? Who am I? All right, let's close with a short chant. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Peace, peace, peace. Thank you for letting me share this teaching with you. This series on Ramana's 40 verses on reality will continue in the following weeks. If this satsang was of interest to you, I have more: a free book site, a YouTube site, and my blog. The URLs will be on screen next. Namaste.